Beneath the waves of the Indian Ocean, hidden under miles of shifting sand and silence, may lie the memory of an entire world, a civilization older than Atlantis, a landmass so vast it once stretched from India to Madagascar. Scientists once drew it on their maps, then erased it when new theories replaced the old. But the myths never let it go. In Tamil poetry, it is Kumari Kandam, a lost kingdom swallowed by the sea. In the whispers of theosophists, it is Lemuria, the cradle of an ancient people whose knowledge was too immense to survive the flood of history. What if this was not legend, but memory? What if beneath the waters, beneath the ruins of Mahabalipuram and the stones of Poompuhar, lies the echo of a forgotten civilization? Imagine cities aligned with stars, temples that sang with resonance, languages carrying syllables across oceans. What if the greatest story ever told is the one we are not allowed to remember? Tonight, let us step into that silence. Let us walk the threshold where myth and science blur. Welcome to the story of Lemuria, the lost civilization erased from history. It begins not with a legend, but with a riddle. In 1864, the English zoologist Philip Sclater published a paper in the Quarterly Journal of Science that startled his peers. While studying lemurs, he noticed something odd. These primates flourished in Madagascar and parts of India, yet they were entirely absent in Africa and the Middle East, the very lands that lay between. How could this be? The oceans, wide and impassable to small primates, should have prevented such a distribution. Unless, Sclater reasoned, the answer was that the animals had once walked across a land that no longer existed. He proposed a vanished landmass connecting India and Madagascar, a bridge across the Indian Ocean. He called it Lemuria. The idea resonated instantly with 19th century science. This was the age of Darwin, of grand theories and sweeping explanations. Naturalists sought elegant solutions to the puzzles of distribution. Before the discovery of continental drift, land bridges were a favoured explanation for why similar species appeared continents apart. In Lemuria, scientists thought they had found the missing piece, a continent swallowed by the sea, solving the enigma of Madagascar's wildlife. The hypothesis spread rapidly. Maps were redrawn to show Lemuria stretching like a phantom continent beneath the Indian Ocean, tethering Africa, India, and Southeast Asia together. In classrooms and lecture halls, professors sketched its outline across chalkboards. For a moment, Lemuria seemed as real as Australia or Antarctica. It provided a convenient explanation not just for lemurs, but also for certain plant species and geological similarities observed along the coasts of India and East Africa. The appeal lay not only in science, but in imagination. The Victorian world was gripped by discovery: lost cities in Mesopotamia, fossils of prehistoric beasts, the ruins of ancient empires. A drowned continent fit the spirit of the age perfectly. Writers and explorers embraced the image of a forgotten land, a place erased by time yet hinted at in the gaps of knowledge. The Indian Ocean, largely uncharted in those days, became a canvas upon which the scientific mind painted possibility. Yet science does not hold still. By the early 20th century, Alfred Wegener proposed a radical idea. Continents themselves moved, drifting slowly over millions of years. His theory of continental drift explained the same puzzles Lemuria had been invented to solve, without requiring a lost continent. Initially mocked, Wegener's vision gained ground as new geological discoveries emerged, matching fossils across far-flung continents, the mirror fit of South America and Africa, the magnetic stripes on the ocean floor. By the 1960s, the theory of plate tectonics had triumphed. Lemuria was unnecessary. Like a candle snuffed out in daylight, Lemuria vanished from scientific respectability. It was reclassified as an error, a historical curiosity, no more valid than maps that once marked, "Here be dragons." Textbooks dropped the name. Encyclopedias reduced it to a footnote. The lost continent was lost again, this time not to the ocean, but to consensus. Yet its story did not end there. For while geology erased Lemuria, memory refused to. The human imagination clings to what is absent, and the idea of a vanished world beneath the sea is too powerful to forget. Atlantis had already captured the Western mind. Why not Lemuria for the Indian Ocean? Soon, mystics and esoteric thinkers began to reframe it. To Helena Blavatsky and the Theosophical Society, Lemuria was not just a continent, but the cradle of an earlier stage of humanity, a land of forgotten wisdom. To Tamil poets and revivalists, it resonated with their own ancient stories of Kumari Kandam, a drowned homeland preserved in Sangam literature. Even today, when you glance at a globe, the Indian Ocean seems strangely empty. Unlike the Atlantic, with its Caribbean islands, or the Pacific scattered with archipelagos, the Indian Ocean stretches vast and unbroken. Beneath its waters, modern oceanography has mapped ridges and plateaus. The Mascarene Plateau, the Chagos Laccadive Ridge, fragments around the Seychelles. To science, these are volcanic and tectonic scars, but to the imagination, they look like the bones of something greater, the submerged shoulders of a continent. Consider how fragile land truly is. Once Antarctica was green, hosting forests and rivers. Once the Sahara was a sea, fertile and teeming with life. Even within human memory, Doggerland, a vast plain connecting Britain to Europe, sank beneath the rising North Sea. If such transformations can occur in tens of thousands of years, why should we dismiss the possibility that lands now buried in the Indian Ocean once stood tall above water? Lemuria, then, is not just a theory that failed. It is a reminder of how knowledge shifts. What is fact today may be discarded tomorrow, and what is myth today may contain a fragment of memory. Science erased Lemuria because it was unnecessary, but erasure is not the same as disproof. The ocean floor, still only partially explored, may hold surprises that vindicate fragments of the old vision in ways we cannot yet imagine. So the first part of this story is not about proving or disproving Lemuria. It is about disappearance itself, how worlds can vanish, not only beneath the sea, but beneath the pages of history. Once Lemuria was spoken in lecture halls, traced on maps, written in scientific journals. Then, with a change of theory, it was erased. But the imagination did not forget. It transformed Lemuria into a cipher, a symbol for what humanity fears most, that civilizations, knowledge, and legacies can slip beneath the horizon without warning, leaving behind only whispers. Picture the globe as a palimpsest, a manuscript written and rewritten, traces of old words faintly visible beneath the new. Beneath our oceans, beneath our categories of science and myth, lies another map. A map of memory, one where coastlines stretch farther than they do now, where temples rise under suns no longer visible, where chants echo across waters that have since drowned the land. We begin here, with absence, with a continent that was drawn, named, and then erased, with the recognition that history, like the sea, is never still. Lemuria may never have been marked with certainty, but its disappearance continues to shape the questions we ask. What else, then, has been erased? If whole continents can vanish first from the earth, then from science, what of civilizations? What of memory? Perhaps the answers do not lie in the libraries of Europe, but in the languages of the South, in the poetry of Tamil Nadu, in stories passed down of a land they called Kumari Kandam. On the far southern tip of India, where the land narrows into a spear of stone, reaching into the sea, stories linger like salt in the air. The Tamil poets of antiquity wrote not only of love and war, but of landscapes now gone. In the Sangam corpus, some of the oldest surviving literature in the Tamil language, verses describe vast lands once stretching far beyond the present coastline. These were not metaphors. They spoke of fertile kingdoms, of academies where poets gathered, of dynasties that ruled over lands now claimed by the waves. The poets gave this drowned world a name, Kumari Kandam. In these verses, the sea is not a backdrop, but a thief. It takes without warning, swallowing palaces, temples, and entire cities. Yet memory endures. The Sangam tradition recalls 3 great literary assemblies, or sangams, convened across thousands of years. The first 2, according to legend, were held in cities now submerged. Only the third survived in Madurai, leaving fragments of what came before. To modern ears, it may sound like allegory, but to the poets themselves, it was recollection, a record of what had been. This vision of Kumari Kandam was more than nostalgia. It was identity. Tamil culture has long carried a deep sense of antiquity, of being custodians of a language spoken continuously for millennia. To claim descent from a land older than history itself was to affirm that heritage. In later centuries, during the colonial era, Tamil revivalists drew upon these myths as proof of cultural depth and resilience. But the roots stretch back further still. In the Silappatikaram, an epic poem dated to around the 2nd century CE, there is a passing reference to the destruction of coastal cities, as if the fact required no explanation. Everyone, it seems, already knew. What is remarkable is not only the persistence of these stories, but their precision. The texts do not describe a vague paradise. They offer details of rivers, mountains, and fertile plains, now missing from geography. They describe a land that was lush, cultivated, and ruled by dynasties stretching across generations. They do not say why it vanished, only that it did. And in that silence we find a trace of truth. For geologists tell us that between 14,000 and 7,000 years ago, as the last ice age ended, global sea levels rose by over 120 meters. Vast stretches of coastal land across the world were drowned. In South Asia, shorelines would have retreated for miles, swallowing river valleys, farms, and villages. If people lived there, and every sign suggests they did, their world would have disappeared in less than a lifetime. The Tamil poets, perhaps unknowingly, preserved not myth but memory, an oral archive of that flood. This is how Lemuria survives, not in textbooks, but in verses sung across centuries. While science erased the word, poetry kept the pulse. And so when 19th century European naturalists coined the name Lemuria to explain fossils and primates, they were stumbling onto a story that Tamil poets had already told for 2,000 years. But what if these poems are more than memory? What if they are maps? Some scholars argue that Sangam verses encode geographical markers of lands no longer visible. Others note the striking parallels between Tamil words and Malagasy, the language of Madagascar, as if fragments of Kumari Kandam sailed across the Indian Ocean long before recorded history. Here we glimpse the first seam, where myth and science brush against each other. One calls it Kumari Kandam, the other calls it Lemuria. Both speak of a land erased, and both leave us with the same haunting question. If memory can survive longer than stone, where else might we find traces of this vanished world? The sea keeps its secrets well, but sometimes the tide recedes just enough for memory to resurface. Off the coast of Tamil Nadu, at a place called Poompuhar, divers in the late 20th century stumbled across stone blocks on the seabed. At first glance they seemed ordinary, no different from the boulders scattered along the shore. But closer inspection revealed a troubling truth. Some were cut into right angles, others aligned in patterns too deliberate to be natural. Steps led downward into the sand, platforms lay side by side as if once part of streets, and walls appeared to extend into darkness. Poompuhar itself is not just any coastal town. Known in Tamil literature as Kaveri-Pumpattinam, it was once the flourishing capital of the early Chola kingdom, a hub of trade and art described in the epic Silappatikaram. Poems recall its busy wharves, its merchants sailing to distant lands, its palaces rising along the Kaveri River. Yet the same texts also whisper of catastrophe, a great flood that swept away the city, leaving only fragments. When divers reported cut stones beneath the sea, it seemed the poems had not been exaggerating but remembering. In 2001, the story deepened. Sonar surveys in the Gulf of Kambat, far to the north near Gujarat, revealed vast geometric patterns beneath 30 meters of water. The outlines looked unmistakably human, straight roads intersecting at right angles, rectangular enclosures resembling courtyards, long linear features stretching for kilometers. The discovery provoked a storm. Could these be the remains of a city older than Harappa or Mohenjo-Daro, perhaps as much as 9,000 years old? Pottery shards dredged from the site were dated by some labs to between 7,500 and 9,000 years before present, far earlier than any known urban settlement in South Asia. Yet skepticism quickly followed. Critics argued the sonar images were being misinterpreted, that currents can shape seabeds into deceptively geometric forms. Others questioned the dating of the artifacts, pointing out that currents might have carried them from elsewhere. Funding for further exploration was cut short, and the debate receded into silence. Still, the images remain, grid-like outlines where no natural pattern seems likely. Glimpses of what could be a city drowned at the dawn of time. The Bay of Bengal itself seems almost complicit in the mystery. Along its coasts lie more legends of submerged cities. At Mahabalipuram, oral traditions speak of the 7 pagodas, 6 temples said to have been swallowed by the sea, leaving only one standing on the shore. During the tsunami of 2004, as the ocean withdrew, witnesses reported seeing walls and steps revealed for the first time in centuries. When the waters returned, divers confirmed the presence of submerged structures not far offshore. Stone foundations aligned in rows, resembling the outlines of shrines. The resonance between myth and evidence is striking. Sangam poetry speaks of coastal kings whose lands were claimed by the ocean. Local fishermen still tell of ancient towns beneath the waves, their lamps glowing faintly at night. Archaeologists, cautious by training, hesitate to declare proof. But the convergence of sonar, stone, and story is difficult to ignore. Consider the wider context. Between 14,000 and 7,000 years ago, as the Ice Age ended, sea levels rose by more than 100 meters worldwide. Vast stretches of coastal plains were inundated. In northern Europe, Doggerland, once a rich landscape of forests and rivers, vanished beneath the North Sea, leaving behind only fishing nets tangled with bones. In Southeast Asia, the Sunda Shelf, now submerged, was once home to rivers that may have nourished great migrations. Why should South Asia be different? Along the shores of the Bay of Bengal, entire cultures may have stood where only water lies today. Imagine the scene. The sun is setting, the horizon a line of molten gold. The waves lap quietly at the shore. Beneath that surface, in silence and silt, walls rise and fall, steps lead downward into darkness, and streets once filled with life now lie deserted, their grids blurred by centuries of tides. Perhaps a temple bell still lies buried, its bronze surface covered in coral, waiting to sound again if struck. Perhaps a sculpted pillar stands upright in the sand, unseen by all but the fish that weave between its carvings. This is the paradox of Poompuhar and Kambat. They are both known and unknown. The evidence is there, tantalizing but incomplete. Enough to suggest human presence, not enough to prove it beyond doubt. Yet when combined with the literary record of Tamil poetry and the myths of drowned kingdoms, the picture sharpens into something compelling. Here, archaeology and memory meet at the edge of water. The poets say the sea took the cities. The divers find stones shaped by human hands. The sonar traces grids that resemble streets. Each alone might be coincidence. Together, they form a whisper of a truth too large to dismiss. That civilizations can be erased not only by time and conquest, but by the relentless rising of the sea. And if one city lies drowned beneath these waters, how many more sleep in silence? The Bay of Bengal may hold not just ruins, but an entire chapter of human history hidden below the tide. Across the world, stories of water rising are among the oldest and most persistent. They are not confined to one culture or one continent. They appear everywhere human beings have settled, echoing like waves across time. In India, the Puranas preserve the tale of Manu, the primordial man who was warned by a fish, an avatar of Vishnu, of an oncoming flood. Manu built a boat, tied it with a serpent to a mountain peak, and survived while the waters swallowed the land. From him, humanity began again. The scene is strikingly similar to the flood narrative in Mesopotamia's Epic of Gilgamesh, where Utnapishtim saves the seeds of life by loading them onto an ark. The biblical story of Noah, written centuries later, carries the same rhythm. Divine warning, a vessel of survival, and a world remade in the flood's wake. For generations, scholars dismissed these accounts as mythic allegory, moral tales of destruction and renewal. Yet modern geology suggests that floods of this magnitude did occur. At the end of the last ice age, around 12,000 to 7,000 years ago, glaciers melted and sea levels rose by more than 100 meters. The process was gradual on a planetary scale, but catastrophic for those living on the coasts. Entire river valleys drowned. Fertile plains became seabeds. Shorelines retreated dozens of kilometers in a single lifetime. The memory of such upheaval would have been seared into human consciousness. The Tamil poets of the Sangam age captured fragments of this catastrophe. Verses describe fertile lands claimed by the sea, kings whose realms vanished overnight, and farmers mourning fields transformed into ocean floor. These were not abstract parables, but laments for a loss remembered in cultural memory. When paired with myths from other cultures, the parallels become difficult to ignore. In Aboriginal Australia, Dreamtime stories recount how the ocean rose to swallow coastal lands, forcing ancestors to retreat inland. Remarkably, some of these stories have been shown to correspond with coastlines that disappeared more than 7,000 years ago, suggesting an oral memory of real geological change. Along the Pacific, Polynesian chants describe islands that walked into the sea. In North America, Algonquin tales speak of waves that consumed whole forests, while the Choctaw remember a flood so vast that mountains alone offered refuge. Even the Mayan Popol Vuh recounts earlier creations destroyed by water and fire before the world we know was born. The presence of fire in many of these myths is also significant. Flood myths often mingle with tales of fire raining from the sky or flames accompanying the waters. Some researchers link this to catastrophic events like volcanic eruptions or even cosmic impacts, which could have triggered both floods and firestorms. In India, certain Puranic cycles describe worlds ending in water and flame, only to be reborn. In Norse mythology, the sea rises during Ragnarok, even as fire engulfs the earth. The combination of flood and fire speaks to an ancient awareness that catastrophe is rarely singular. The elements conspire, weaving destruction in tandem. These recurring themes, survival through boats, destruction by water and fire, renewal after catastrophe, suggest a shared human archive of trauma. They may not recount a single event, but a series of upheavals across regions, each remembered in local idiom. And yet the similarities are striking enough to suggest that the myths are not pure invention. They are memories, shaped and reshaped, but rooted in experiences our ancestors endured. Imagine the reality behind the story. You are part of a coastal community at the end of the Ice Age. The sea, once distant, creeps closer each year. Storms grow fiercer, tides higher. One day a surge rises beyond expectation, tearing away homes and fields. Villagers flee inland, carrying what they can. Children hear elders whisper, "The sea is angry, the gods demand sacrifice." What begins as lived trauma becomes story. What story becomes is myth. And what myth preserves is memory. For cultures like the Tamils, these memories were not optional. They were identity. The story of Kumari Kandam is not of a mythical paradise, but of real land lost, of kingdoms erased, of poets and kings forced to remember in verse what the waves had erased in stone. In this, Tamil tradition mirrors the memory work of cultures across the globe, preserving catastrophe in myth so that its lessons would not vanish. If we read these myths not only as allegory but as record, then Lemuria, or Kumari Kandam, no longer seems like fantasy. It becomes a name for something humanity has always known, that civilizations can be drowned, that fire and water can erase worlds, and that memory is the only vessel that endures. The myths leave us with an unsettling realization. Floods are not past events alone. The Earth's history is cyclical, its climate volatile, its oceans restless. What was erased once may be erased again, and in that rhythm lies a truth the ancients understood well. To remember the flood is not merely to recall the past, but to prepare for the future. Not all the fragments of Lemuria come from poems or floods. Some arrive as stranger echoes, half history and half myth. Ancient travellers to India carried back reports that sounded improbable even in their own time. Megasthenes, a Greek envoy at the court of Chandragupta Maurya in the 3rd century BCE, wrote of lands where people of extraordinary stature were said to dwell along the coasts. Other sources, collected in fragments through Pliny and later chroniclers, repeated tales of beings larger than ordinary men living at the margins of the known world. In Tamil lore, the echoes are even sharper. Certain Sangam verses mention warriors and kings of immense strength, protectors of coastlines that would later vanish beneath the sea. Folktales passed down in rural Tamil Nadu speak of ancestral beings who towered above ordinary humans, remembered less as monsters than as guardians. In the highlands of Kerala and Sri Lanka, megalithic stones are sometimes called footprints of the ancients, as if they could only have been set in place by hands far stronger than ours. Modern archaeology has, of course, no confirmed evidence of a race of giants. Yet the stories persist, carried in folklore across continents. Native traditions in North America speak of the tall ones who lived before the flood. The Bible describes the Nephilim, mighty men of old. Polynesian myths tell of giant navigators who first crossed the seas. Even in Madagascar, where the echoes of Lemuria are strongest, there are oral accounts of the Vazimba, a mysterious early people remembered as taller and older than later arrivals. What do we make of this chorus of giants? Perhaps they are symbolic, metaphors for ancestral power. Perhaps they represent memories of encounters with peoples of unusual height, now lost to history. Or perhaps they are cultural fingerprints of something stranger, echoes of civilizations erased so completely that only their shadows in myth remain. The stones themselves seem to lean toward mystery. In southern India, dolmens and standing stones dot the landscape, some weighing many tons. While mainstream archaeology attributes them to Iron Age cultures, local lore insists they were raised by a people older still, people who left no names, only monuments too large to be forgotten. To the poets of Tamil Nadu, these were reminders. There were civilizations before us, and they were not small. If Kumari Kandam, the Tamil name for Lemuria, truly stretched into the sea, then its disappearance would not only have swallowed land, but also legends. Legends that survived as tales of giant kings, heroic guardians, and vanished protectors. Whether real or symbolic, they tell us something vital. The memory of Lemuria was not of fragility, but of strength, a civilization immense enough that its loss still resounds like footsteps fading into the surf. And here we arrive at a curious crossroads. When stories of vanished lands are mixed with stories of vanished beings, are we looking at two separate myths, or two sides of the same erased memory? Every era of knowledge has its silences. In the 19th century, Lemuria was spoken of not in whispers, but in the halls of learned societies. Zoologists pointed to it as the missing link for lemurs and other species. Geologists described vanished land bridges to explain curious distributions of plants. For a brief time, Lemuria sat beside Africa and Asia on maps of scholarly speculation. But as the theory of continental drift gained ground in the early 20th century, Lemuria began to fade. Plate tectonics offered a cleaner solution. The continents themselves had moved, drifting on vast convective currents in the Earth's mantle. What once required sunken continents could now be explained by shifting plates. Science does not weep when it forgets. The old theories are erased, filed as mistakes. Lemuria, once in journals, was reduced to a footnote, a curiosity. But the human mind is not so quick to discard. When academia abandoned the word, others picked it up. Helena Blavatsky, founder of the Theosophical Society, wove Lemuria into her cosmic visions. In her writings, Lemuria was not a lost landmass, but a stage in human evolution, a place where earlier root races thrived before Atlantis. To believers, it became a continent of mystical beings, adepts who lived in harmony with spiritual laws. To critics, it was fantasy masquerading as science. Yet in this migration, from science to myth, something intriguing happens. Lemuria ceases to be a sterile hypothesis and becomes a symbol. In the hands of theosophists, occultists, and later esoteric writers, it is recast as a civilization erased not only from geography but from memory. It is hidden knowledge, a story whispered against the official narrative. And that transformation, whether we accept its details or not, is powerful. Because it keeps the question alive. What if there really was something there? Even outside esoteric circles, echoes remained. Early Tamil revivalists, hearing Western scholars speak of Lemuria, recognized in it their own Kumari Kandam, the drowned homeland of their ancestors described in Sangam poetry. They embraced the name as proof that science had stumbled onto what tradition already knew. For a time, the scientific Lemuria and the mythic Kumari Kandam overlapped, like two reflections in water. This is the paradox. When science forgets, myth remembers. And often it is myth that inspires new searches. For if stories persist across millennia, if cultures insist on lands swallowed by the sea, perhaps the erasure is not total. Perhaps fragments wait to be found in stone, in language, in ritual. To stand at this threshold is to feel the tug of both worlds, the rigour of geology and the resonance of memory. Both cannot be ignored. The silence left by science becomes an invitation to look again, not at textbooks, but at coastlines, temples, and seabeds. From here, the trail does not lead into libraries, but into the sea itself. Because in the waves off Tamil Nadu, memory and matter converge in ruins that the ocean has hidden, but not destroyed. The ocean is often described as a graveyard of civilizations, but sometimes it behaves like a reluctant archivist, hiding its treasures under layers of silt, only to reveal them in moments of upheaval. Such a moment arrived on the morning of December 26, 2004, when a colossal tsunami, triggered by an undersea earthquake, struck the Indian Ocean. As walls of water swept inland, destroying villages and taking countless lives, something extraordinary happened along the coast of Tamil Nadu at Mahabalipuram. For a few brief hours the sea pulled back, and where water had always covered stone, an ancient world reappeared. Eyewitnesses recall seeing long walls of dressed stone stretching into the distance, steps leading down into the seabed, and scattered carvings that looked eerily like lions and deities. Locals were stunned. For centuries their legends had spoken of the 7 pagodas, a chain of temples said to have once lined the shore. Only one remained visible, the shore temple, built by the Pallavas in the 7th century CE. The rest, according to myth, had been swallowed by the sea. When the waters withdrew that day, villagers pointed to the ruins with awe. The other 6 have returned. Marine archaeologists rushed to investigate. Divers soon confirmed the presence of submerged structures just offshore. Rows of granite blocks, foundations aligned in ways suggestive of shrines, and scattered pillars covered in coral. The style bore similarities to Pallava architecture, but the evidence also hinted that some of these ruins might predate the known temple by centuries. Though research was limited by turbulent waters and dangerous currents, the images and reports were enough to reignite debate. Could it be that the legends were accurate? Had there once been a great temple complex, most of which now lies beneath the waves? Mahabalipuram's importance is not only architectural, but symbolic. The shore temple itself is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, famous for its intricate carvings and dramatic placement at the edge of the sea. Ancient travellers, including Marco Polo, wrote of its beauty. To imagine 6 more temples rising beside it creates a picture of a sacred city shimmering against the horizon, its towers serving as both landmarks for sailors and as cosmic markers aligned to the heavens. Such a city, swallowed by the ocean, would naturally have left a scar in memory deep enough to become legend. Nor is Mahabalipuram unique. The Indian Ocean is littered with whispers of submerged temples. Off the coast of Poompuhar, Sonar has revealed geometric patterns, while in Gujarat, the ruins of Dvaraka lie beneath the sea. The persistence of these parallels suggests something larger, that coastal civilizations in South Asia faced repeated episodes of sea level rise, storms, and tectonic shifts. Each catastrophe drowned a piece of cultural memory, yet fragments survived in myth and song. What makes Mahabalipuram so compelling is the way myth and evidence converged in plain sight. For generations, scholars dismissed the 7 pagodas as exaggeration, assuming local storytellers invented them to explain the grandeur of the shore temple. But when the tsunami exposed long-hidden walls, it was as if the sea itself confirmed the oral tradition. For once, legend and archaeology spoke with the same voice. Picture it. The tide has receded far beyond its normal boundary, revealing ground no living villager has ever walked upon. The seabed is wet and glistening, littered with shells. As people wander out cautiously, they find steps cut into stone leading to nowhere, walls encrusted with barnacles, statues whose faces have been blurred by centuries of water. Some drop to their knees, recognizing deities they had only heard of in stories. Others whisper in fear, convinced the sea has revealed the truth, only to reclaim it again. Hours later, the tide returns, swallowing the ruins in silence as if nothing had happened. For archaeologists, such moments are invaluable. The tsunami acted like a fleeting excavation, pulling back the ocean's curtain. Though destructive, it allowed researchers to glimpse what normally lies concealed. Sonar mapping and underwater photography since then have added detail. Submerged walls running parallel to the shore, rectangular platforms suggestive of temple bases, and collapsed columns scattered across the seabed. Each clue is partial, but together they sketch the outline of a vanished sacred complex. Skeptics caution that not all of these structures are human-made. Some may be natural rock formations shaped by erosion. The sea is a trickster. It can carve lines that mimic human intention. But the regularity of certain features, their alignment with the surviving shore temple, and the persistence of oral tradition argue for something more. Even if only a portion of the submerged stones are the work of human hands, they prove that myth preserved memory more faithfully than scholars once allowed. What then does Mahabalipuram tell us about Lemuria? Not that Lemuria itself stood here, but that the principle of erasure is real. Civilizations can build monuments that last 1,000 years, yet all it takes is one shift of the sea to bury them beyond reach. And when stone sinks, story remains. The 7 pagodas may have been dismissed by archaeologists, but the people remembered. When the sea briefly relented, their memory was vindicated. The stones beneath the waves remind us of a simple truth. What is erased is not always gone. Sometimes it waits in silence, revealed only when catastrophe tears the veil aside. The ocean may be vast and merciless, but it cannot fully suppress memory. Even in ruin, the stones still whisper, "We were here." Sometimes the most astonishing discoveries begin with the smallest fragments. In 2013, a team of geologists studying the volcanic island of Mauritius, famous for its beaches and extinct dodo, came across something that should not have been there. Tiny grains of zircon crystals buried in the sand. Zircon is one of the most durable minerals on Earth, often used by scientists to date geological events because it can survive billions of years. These particular zircons were dated to around 3 billion years old, far older than the island itself, which had formed only about 9 million years ago through volcanic eruptions on the ocean floor. The puzzle was undeniable. How could ancient crystals billions of years old be sitting on a young volcanic island? The only explanation was that they did not originate on Mauritius at all. They had been carried upward by magma rising from deep beneath the seabed, torn from fragments of a much older continental crust hidden under the Indian Ocean. That hidden fragment was given a name, Mauritia. Mauritia was not a vast continent in the sense Lemuria was once imagined, but rather a microcontinent, a sliver of ancient crust that had once joined Madagascar, India, and parts of East Africa. When the supercontinent Gondwana began to break apart about 85 million years ago, Mauritia fractured and sank, leaving behind only traces now buried under volcanic layers. For mainstream geology, this was a revelation. The Indian Ocean, once thought to be a basin of purely oceanic crust, actually concealed fragments of vanished land. The discovery of Mauritia gave scientific weight to an idea that had been dismissed for decades. Continents can, and do, disappear beneath the sea. While Lemuria, as drawn in 19th century maps, may never have existed in that exact form, Mauritia demonstrated that lost continents are not pure fantasy. They are part of Earth's deep history, erased from the surface, but detectable in the clues left behind. For those who had long cherished the myth of Lemuria, Mauritia felt like vindication. Here at last was proof that the Indian Ocean hid more than endless water. It concealed memory in stone. The ancient Tamil poets had sung of drowned kingdoms, and while Mauritia predates human history by millions of years, the principle is the same. Land once above water can sink, and when it does, its absence haunts both science and story. Mauritia is not alone. Other microcontinents have been identified across the world. Zealandia beneath New Zealand, once nearly the size of Australia, the Kerguelen Plateau, submerged south of India, and fragments beneath the North Atlantic. Together, these discoveries have reshaped our understanding of Earth's surface, showing that oceans are not simply voids but cemeteries of forgotten landmasses. In this sense, Lemuria may never have been wrong, only misdrawn. Consider the strange symmetry. In the 19th century, scientists invented Lemuria to explain puzzles of biology, while lemurs lived in both India and Madagascar. That explanation was discarded when plate tectonics emerged, but in the 21st century, geologists searching not for lemurs but for zircons stumbled on something eerily similar, a drowned fragment of crust bridging India and Madagascar. What began as a zoologist's dream had returned, transformed into geological fact. To imagine Mauritia is to picture a world long before humans, when Gondwana stretched across the southern hemisphere. Dinosaurs roamed its forests, rivers wound across its plains, and strange reptiles glided through its skies. When the continents rifted apart, Mauritia fractured, breaking into islands before vanishing beneath the waves. Today, only hints remain. Ancient crystals, magnetic anomalies on the seafloor, subtle gravitational shifts betraying the weight of sunken land. Standing on the beaches of Mauritius, you would never know what lies below. The sand is white, the sea impossibly blue, the horizon a seamless arc, yet beneath the turquoise waters, under layers of volcanic basalt, sleeps a continent older than imagination. Divers explore coral reefs unaware that 3 billion-year-old zircon lies hidden in the seabed. Tourists climb dormant volcanoes without realizing they are standing atop the grave of an ancient land. What does this mean for Lemuria? Strictly speaking, Mauritia is not Lemuria. It is older, more fragmented, and uninhabited by humans. Yet its discovery proves the possibility at the heart of the Lemurian myth, that continents can be erased from the visible world, leaving only whispers behind. If science can acknowledge Mauritia, why dismiss so easily the memory of Kumari Kandam preserved in Tamil tradition? Perhaps Lemuria is not one single continent waiting to be found, but a mosaic of drowned lands, Mauritia among them, layered beneath the Indian Ocean like pages in a submerged book. Imagine Earth not as fixed but as fluid. The continents drift, collide, and fracture. Mountains rise and erode, seas advance and retreat. From this perspective, The Indian Ocean is not empty space but a palimpsest, its depths concealing remnants of lost geographies. Each fragment discovered, a crystal, a ridge, a plateau, is a clue that what we call erased is often only hidden. Mauritia teaches us humility. The land beneath our feet is not eternal. Continents can vanish, and with them everything upon them. If human civilizations arose along coasts that are now drowned, as myths, sonar images, and submerged ruins suggest, then their stories may be as fragile as sand before the tide. Lemuria may never appear on a geological map the way 19th century scholars imagined, but its essence remains. A reminder that nothing on Earth is permanent, not even continents. When archaeologists search for traces of vanished worlds, they often turn to stones, ceramics, or bones. Yet there is another archive, one more fragile but sometimes longer-lived than any monument: language. Words can travel across oceans, survive migrations, and echo memories of contact long after cities have disappeared. And in the Indian Ocean, there exists a linguistic riddle that seems to whisper of a deeper connection, one that should not exist. The people of Madagascar, nearly 4,000 kilometers from India, speak Malagasy. Linguists classify Malagasy as part of the Austronesian family, linking it to languages of Southeast Asia such as Malay, Javanese, and Tagalog. This makes sense. Genetic and linguistic evidence shows that Austronesian sailors reached Madagascar around 1,500 years ago, bringing their language and culture with them. But within Malagasy, scholars have noted peculiar resonances, faint but distinct echoes of Dravidian languages, especially Tamil. Certain words for directions, kinship, rice cultivation, and even ritual objects seem to align too closely to dismiss as coincidence. How could this be? Mainstream linguists argue that Indian merchants and sailors, part of Indian Ocean trade networks, influenced the Malagasy tongue during the first millennium CE. Tamil traders are well documented in inscriptions as far afield as Indonesia and the Red Sea, and their influence on Madagascar would not be surprising. But to others, the echoes seem older, deeper, as though the Tamil-Malagasy connection hints at contact predating known trade. Could it reflect memory of a time when land or island stepping stones made crossings easier, or when cultures long erased by the sea carried words across the water? The Indian Ocean has been a highway of exchange for millennia. Before Europeans sailed its waters, Arab, Persian, and Indian traders plied its monsoon winds, carrying spices, textiles, and stories. The Austronesians themselves were master navigators, voyaging in outrigger canoes across thousands of kilometers. Yet the persistence of Dravidian fingerprints in Madagascar suggests something more intimate than trade, a cultural blending that left its imprint in language. Consider the word Varatraza, used in Madagascar to describe a monsoon wind. Its sound and structure are startlingly similar to Tamil words for seasonal winds. Terms for rice, the staple crop of both Tamil Nadu and Madagascar, also show overlaps, hinting at the transfer not only of vocabulary but of agricultural techniques. These are not isolated borrowings, but patterns, threads woven into the very fabric of the Malagasy tongue. Language is an unusually durable witness. Oral traditions may fade, monuments may sink, but phonetic patterns can survive in daily speech for thousands of years. In Australia, Aboriginal stories describing ancient coastlines have survived intact for over 7,000 years. If such precision of memory is possible, then the faint Tamil echoes in Malagasy might be more than accidents of trade. They may be linguistic fossils of contact reaching back into the deep past, when rising seas erased coastal cultures and scattered their words across distant shores. Even the structure of Malagasy grammar shows peculiarities. While firmly Austronesian, it incorporates elements that parallel Dravidian emphasis on suffixes and honorifics. Some linguists have suggested this blending reflects prolonged bilingual contact, not mere loanwords. If true, then Tamil speakers were not just trading with Madagascar, they may have lived, settled, and intermarried there in significant numbers. And if that is the case, when did this begin? Was it truly only in the last 2,000 years, or does it point to earlier, undocumented movements across an ocean that is now far emptier of land than it once was? Here is where myth and science brush against each other again. The poets of Sangam literature wrote of lands swallowed by the sea, the Malagasy. Remember ancestral voyagers arriving from the east. Between them lies the Indian Ocean, where drowned ridges and plateaus hint that once there may have been more than water connecting them. Imagine a scene thousands of years ago. A group of sailors pushes off from a Tamil coast guided by stars and currents. Their language, sung in chants to steady the oars, carries words for wind, rice, kinship, gods. Days or weeks later, they land on a distant shore where people of Austronesian stock already farm and fish. They trade, intermarry, share rituals. Centuries pass, seas rise, coastlines vanish. But the words remain: Varatraza, the wind, Vari, the rice, carried in daily speech long after memory of the encounter is gone. This is the quiet testimony of Lemuria, not in ruins or relics, but in syllables that should not connect yet do. If continents can sink, then languages can serve as their shadows, surviving as proof that something once stood between. Today, when Malagasy farmers plant rice, they use a word faintly echoing one used in Tamil Nadu. When sailors invoke the seasonal winds, their words carry the cadence of Dravidian speech. They may not know it, but their very vocabulary is an archive of forgotten contact. Language then becomes a bridge where archaeology cannot reach. It suggests that the Indian Ocean has always been less a barrier than a medium, a place where memory floats, carried by wind and tide. And in its faintest echoes we may still hear Lemuria, not as stone beneath the sea, but as sound in the mouth, a ghost of a lost world preserved in the simplest act of naming. Among the many tales preserved in India's epic traditions, few are as dazzling or as haunting as that of Dvaraka, the golden city of Lord Krishna. In the Mahabharata and later texts such as the Harivamsa and Bhagavata Purana, Dvaraka is described in luminous detail. Its streets were paved with crystal, its palaces gleamed with silver and gold, and its gates were set with gems that sparkled like constellations. The city itself stood on the edge of the Arabian Sea, its harbours crowded with ships that sailed to distant lands. It was not merely a capital, but a vision of cosmic order on earth. Yet these radiant descriptions are accompanied by an ominous prophecy. After Krishna's departure from the world, the texts say, Dvaraka was fated to sink beneath the waves. The sea would reclaim its splendour in a single night, leaving nothing but memory. For centuries, scholars treated this as allegory, a symbolic tale of impermanence. But the ocean has its own way of confirming what myth preserves. In the 20th century, Indian archaeologists began exploring the waters off modern Dvārakā in Gujarat. What they found challenged the line between legend and history. Divers reported walls of stone blocks fitted together, steps leading downward, and wharves that could once have harboured fleets of ships. Sonar mapping revealed geometric patterns beneath the water, straight lines intersecting at right angles, long avenues stretching into the sea. The layout was not random. It looked like the skeleton of a city. Some of the artefacts brought to the surface were equally striking. Pottery fragments, beads, and even a stone anchor were discovered. Thermoluminescence dating suggested some of these pieces were over 3,500 years old, while a handful of samples hinted at ages as old as 7,500 years. If even the earlier range is correct, the submerged ruins of Dvaraka would place it among the oldest urban settlements in South Asia, predating the Harappan cities of the Indus Valley. The discoveries provoked controversy. Skeptics argued that natural rock formations can mimic man-made structures, that some artifacts may have been displaced by currents. Others pointed out that dating submerged materials is notoriously difficult and that extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof. Yet for many, the convergence of myth and evidence was too powerful to ignore. Here was a city remembered in sacred epics for millennia, and there beneath the waves were ruins in the very place tradition said they lay. Beyond archaeology, the most intriguing detail is orientation. Studies of the submerged structures suggest alignments with cardinal directions and celestial markers, consistent with astronomical knowledge. The surviving texts describe Dvaraka as a city aligned with the heavens, built as a reflection of cosmic order. Could these alignments be more than coincidence? Archaeoastronomers argue that some of the site's features fit the positions of stars as they would have appeared thousands of years ago, echoing the theme of a city built not just on Earth, but also in harmony with the sky. The myth itself lingers like a warning. The Mahabharata describes the sea advancing inexorably, one wave after another, as if responding to Krishna's absence. Citizens watch in despair as palaces crumble, towers topple, and the golden streets vanish beneath the tide. In a matter of hours, what had been one of the most resplendent cities on Earth was erased. It is a story of cosmic justice, but it is also a memory of catastrophe. Archaeologists working off Dvārakā in recent decades have located multiple sites, some close to the shore, others kilometers out to sea. This suggests that the coastline itself has shifted repeatedly. Geological studies confirm that the region has experienced both tectonic activity and dramatic sea level changes since the end of the Ice Age. In this context, the sinking of Dvaraka may not be myth at all, but a poetic account of real coastal submergence. Imagine walking along that ancient shoreline. Before you, towers rise gleaming, their tips catching the last rays of the sun. The harbour is alive with noise, merchants shouting, sails snapping, the clang of anchors. And then, one night, the tide comes in higher than before. The ground trembles and a roar fills the air. The sea surges over the quays, floods the streets, sweeps away carts and animals, climbs the steps of palaces. By dawn, the city is gone. Only the memory remains, carried forward by poets who insist it must not be forgotten. Dvaraka's fate resonates with other drowned cities of the world, from Herakleion in Egypt to Pavlopetri in Greece. Each reaffirms that human settlements along the coasts are fragile, always at the mercy of shifting seas. Yet Dvaraka is unique in the richness of its textual record. Few submerged sites are so vividly described in ancient literature, then partially confirmed by archaeology. To the people of Gujarat today, Dvaraka remains sacred. Pilgrims visit the modern city, believing it to be built on the site of Krishna's original capital. Temples rise where waves break, and at low tide, stone steps lead into the sea, as if still inviting worshippers to enter the drowned city. Rituals performed here are not acts of nostalgia, but of continuity, ways of keeping alive a memory that the ocean tried to erase. Dvaraka, then, is more than an archaeological site or a myth. It is a mirror of Lemuria's story, a shining city remembered in verse, swallowed by water, confirmed in stone. It stands as testimony that what seems like allegory may sometimes be history, and that civilizations can vanish not over centuries but in a single night. If Dvaraka could be both remembered in myth and rediscovered in the sea, how many other cities lie waiting beneath the waves? And if their alignments once spoke to the stars, what cosmic map might emerge if we could place them all together? Not all ruins lie beneath the ocean. Some remain standing on land, whispering of skies that no longer exist. In Tamil Nadu, the Brihadiswara temple towers above the plains, its granite crown glowing under the sun. Built more than 1,000 years ago during the Chola dynasty, it is an architectural marvel. But within its design lingers something far older. For the inner sanctum, the Garbhagriha, is not aligned to the east as one would expect. Instead, it tilts at a precise angle, allowing the sun's rays to strike the sanctum only on certain days of the year. Days that no longer align with today's solstices or equinoxes. Why would architects make such an error? Unless it was not an error at all. Unless the builders were preserving an older orientation, a memory of the sky as it once was. Archaeoastronomers studying temples across southern India, Cambodia, and even Peru find similar anomalies, structures that line up not with the heavens as we see them now, but with positions of stars thousands of years ago. It is as though ancient builders were recording not the present sky, but a past one, embedding memory in stone. In Brihadiswara, in Chidambaram, in countless smaller shrines, alignments whisper of vanished solstices. The stars they once gazed upon have shifted with precession, the slow wobble of Earth's axis. Yet the temples remain fixed, a record of the heavens engraved in architecture. They are archives, not of scripture but of sky, and through them we glimpse the possibility that Lemuria, if it existed, was not remembered only in myth or flood, but in orientation, in alignments calculated by astronomer priests who preserved memory with mathematics. The connection deepens when we recall Dvaraka's drowned ruins, oriented to the stars, or Mahabalipuram's shrines, aligned with sunrise. Across India's coasts, across forgotten worlds, the pattern repeats. To build was to remember. To align stone with sky was to resist erasure. Imagine a night thousands of years ago. Priests stand on temple steps, watching Orion rise above the horizon, aligning their structures to its belt. Generations pass, the sky shifts, the ocean rises. Cities sink, poems scatter, knowledge fades. But the stones remain. They do not drift with precession. They do not rise or fall with tides. They hold their angle stubbornly, whispering, "This is where the stars once stood." If we listen, these alignments become portals, leading us back to skies that civilizations knew before they were erased. And if the sky is an archive, then perhaps Lemuria was never fully lost. Its memory glimmers still in the angles of temples, in shadows cast at dawn, in the geometry of sanctums where light falls only on days that no longer exist. From stars above, we now turn to sound below, because some say the true legacy of Lemuria was not carved in stone or aligned with stars, but sung into being. Step inside one of the ancient granite temples of Tamil Nadu and pause in the silence. At first the air seems still, but then a single note, a chant of Om, rolls across the chamber, and suddenly the stone itself appears to awaken. The vibration doesn't stop at your ears. It travels into your chest, your bones, even the soles of your feet. The walls and floor hum as though the temple itself is singing. This is no accident of architecture. These structures were tuned like instruments, designed with a precision that allowed sound to echo, build, and fold back upon itself. The ancients did not simply build for sight, they built for sound. Indian philosophy has long preserved the concept of nada brahma, the universe itself as vibration, sound as the primal act of creation. The syllable Om is said to be not just a chant, but the resonance of existence itself, containing in its tones the seed of all things. If creation began with sound, then perhaps civilization too could be rooted in resonance. This is where some researchers and esoteric thinkers place Lemuria. They argue that its people may not have defined themselves through monumental cities alone, but through mastery of sound, a civilization encoded not in bricks but in vibration. Evidence of this philosophy can be traced in India's acoustic traditions. The great temples of Chidambaram, Brihadiswara, and Madurai were not only religious centres but sonic laboratories. In certain sanctums, a handclap can trigger 7 distinct echoes, each tone separate, as if the space were designed to reveal the full musical scale. In others, the columns themselves resonate when struck, producing notes like stone tuning forks. Some South Indian temples contain musical pillars, intricately carved granite shafts that sing when tapped. These are not accidents of geology. They are deliberate, suggesting an understanding of resonance so refined it could transform heavy granite into instruments. The Sangam poets too spoke of sound as essence. Their verses linked landscapes with meters, emotions with rhythms, as if the world itself were a poem waiting to be sung. In the Tolkappiyam, one of the oldest Tamil texts, human life is divided into tinai, landscapes of love, war, longing, and reunion. Each tinai corresponds not only to place and feeling, but also to meter and melody, as though culture itself was tuned to the same laws as music. This intertwining of geography, emotion, and rhythm suggests a worldview where resonance was not metaphor, but foundation. Modern science is beginning to circle back to this ancient intuition. Cymatics experiments show that when fine powders or water are exposed to sound frequencies, they arrange themselves into intricate geometric patterns, circles, spirals, even shapes resembling mandalas. The higher the frequency, the more complex the design. What ancient builders intuited through temples and chants, physics now confirms. Sound organizes matter. Imagine, then, a culture that built not just with stone but with vibration, shaping memory through resonance. Could Lemuria have been such a civilization? One whose legacy survives less in ruins than in the rhythms of ritual and song? Consider the veena, the ancient stringed instrument of Tamil Nadu. Its long resonating body is carved from jackwood, its frets fixed with wax, its strings plucked to produce tones said to mirror the vibrations of the cosmos. Classical texts describe the veena as modelled on the human body, its music thought to echo the energies that flow through living beings. To play the veena is not merely to make music, but to participate in cosmic harmony. Was this an echo of Lemurian science, a memory of a time when instruments were tools of alignment between human and universe? Ritual practice also reflects this. In temple ceremonies, priests chant Vedic hymns in precise intonations, often accompanied by instruments like conch shells, bells, and drums. Each sound is believed to purify space, ward off imbalance, and invite divine presence. But beyond theology, these rituals create an acoustic architecture, overlapping waves of sound that transform stone chambers into resonant chambers of energy. To experience such a ritual is to stand inside a living instrument where the body itself vibrates in tune with the space. Even outside temples, sound shaped life. Farmers sang while planting rice, fishermen called to the sea with chants, and healers used mantras for ailments. In this way, resonance became both practical and sacred, woven into survival as much as worship. If Lemuria was real, its memory may persist not in monumental ruins, but in these living traditions, where vibration is seen as both the origin and sustainer of life. There is also the matter of transmission. Sound travels where stone cannot. When seas rose and swallowed coasts, temples crumbled and cities vanished. But chants could be carried inland, sung again, preserved in memory. Unlike walls which erode, words and rhythms move with people. This may explain why Tamil chants bear faint echoes in distant Polynesian songs, or why Malagasy terms mirror Tamil syllables. Sound floats. It survives the flood. Imagine for a moment a Lemurian ritual. On a coastline now hidden beneath the Indian Ocean, hundreds gather at a circular stone platform. At its centre stands a great pillar carved with spiral motifs. The people sit in concentric circles around it, chanting a syllable in perfect unison. As their voices rise, the pillar begins to hum, its spiral grooves vibrating with resonance. The ground itself seems to pulse. The chant builds until the air trembles. Then silence. For an instant, there is only the echo of the world itself, vibrating as if in memory of something too vast to be contained. Perhaps this is what the Tamil poets meant when they described memory as rhythm. Perhaps this is why temple acoustics are tuned to frequencies that stir not only the ear, but the body. And perhaps this is why Lemuria, even if drowned, still whispers. Not as ruins beneath the waves, but as sound in the air, chants, rhythms, mantras, vibrations that have endured where stone has not. To search for Lemuria, then, is not only to look for ruins beneath the sea. It is to listen, to enter temples, to hear the pillars sing, to feel the vibration of a syllable in the chest. Lemuria may have vanished as land, but as resonance, it survives. And as long as sound can be made, the memory of that civilization will not be fully erased. Walk through a Tamil village at dawn, and you may see women bent low over the thresholds of their homes, their fingers trailing rice flour in arcs across the ground. These are kolam, daily drawings made of simple white lines that form loops, knots, and spirals. To the passerby, they may look like decoration, but to those who draw them, they are acts of remembrance. Each line is a prayer for prosperity, each curve a protection against chaos, each spiral a symbol of continuity. What vanishes at night, swept away by footsteps or wind, is redrawn again each morning, linking yesterday to today in an endless cycle. The spiral is one of the oldest motifs in human expression. It adorns the stones of megalithic tombs in Ireland, the pottery of ancient China, the carvings of the Indus Valley, and the rock art of Native America. In Tamil Nadu, it is woven into kolam, into temple architecture, into the curls of Shiva's locks as the cosmic dancer. Its persistence suggests more than ornament, it is the geometry of memory. In Sangam literature, life is not linear, but cyclical. Human emotions and landscapes are grouped into tainai, categories of experience that recur again and again, like seasons. Love and separation, war and reunion, fertility and barrenness, each follows the other in spirals of time. The past is never gone, only folded back, waiting to return in a new form. This worldview is echoed in the ancient text Tolkapiam, which treats poetry not as a fixed artifact, but as a rhythm reflecting cycles of nature. Architecture reflects this same philosophy. The great temples of South India are designed as mandalas in stone, concentric squares and circles that guide the pilgrim inward, step by step, toward the sanctum. To walk the temple corridors is to move along a spiral of space, each turn drawing the worshipper deeper into the sacred center. The corridors of Rameswaram, stretching seemingly without end, fold space back upon itself, creating the sensation of walking inside a spiral of eternity. Even dance embodies the pattern. In Bharatanatyam, one of the oldest classical dance traditions, performers use spirals of the body, curved arms, circular footwork, turning steps, to symbolize the cycles of creation and destruction. The body itself becomes a spiral in motion, retelling cosmic rhythms in every performance. When combined with music built on repeating ragas and talas, the effect is hypnotic, as though time itself is being wound and unwound before the audience's eyes. Science, too, recognizes the spiral as a universal form. Galaxies whirl in spirals, stars coil into arms of light. DNA itself is a double helix, a spiral of memory inscribed in every living being. Seashells follow logarithmic spirals as they grow, each chamber recording a stage of life, yet always connected to the whole. To the ancients, these natural spirals may have been read as signatures of continuity, reminders that memory is embedded not only in culture, but in the fabric of nature. Could it be that the spiral was Lemuria's most enduring gift? If Lemurian knowledge survived the drowning of lands, it may have been encoded not in words alone, but in forms repeated across cultures. The Tamil kolam, the megalithic spirals of Ireland, the whorls carved at Göbekli Tepe, all may be cultural fossils of a philosophy that saw time not as a straight line, but as cycles of return. If so, then the spiral is more than art. It is Lemuria remembering itself. Imagine an ancient Lemurian ritual, perhaps on a promontory now long submerged. In the sand, priests draw spirals that expand outward like ripples. At the center stands a stone pillar carved with spiral grooves, catching the light of the setting sun. Around it, dancers move in arcs, their bodies creating circles within circles, while singers chant verses that loop and return in refrains. As the tide advances, the water itself draws spirals at their feet, waves curling in eternal curves. The ritual is not about permanence, but about repetition, ensuring that when land is lost, the memory returns elsewhere, in another age, another form. Kolam itself embodies this principle of impermanence. Each design is temporary, erased by evening, yet redrawn every morning in variations both subtle and grand. It is memory that survives by being renewed, not preserved. This may have been Lemuria's insight, that to survive catastrophe, one must encode memory in patterns that reappear naturally, like spirals in shells or galaxies. What is drowned cannot be rebuilt, but it can be remembered in forms too universal to die. Even in language, the spiral is present. Tamil grammar and poetics describe cycles of sound and rhythm, with refrains that spiral back into verses. In certain chants, lines repeat in expanding circles, layering meaning with each return. Memory here is not about static preservation, but about recurrence, about hearing the same truth from new angles. Walk through the temple corridors of Rameswaram and clap your hands. The echoes return in waves, spiraling into distance, folding sound back upon itself. Step by step, you are drawn deeper into the spiral of memory, where each turn is both new and familiar. The architecture itself teaches what the kolam teaches, what the dance teaches, what the galaxy teaches. Nothing is lost, everything returns, folded into the spiral. The spiral becomes a bridge between myth and science, art and memory. It reminds us that civilizations too move in cycles. They rise, fall, disappear, and then reappear, not identical, but remembered in fragments, in forms, in echoes. Lemuria may be gone, but its memory spirals through time, resurfacing in poems, in rituals, in the very geometry of life. Between the southern tip of India and the northern coast of Sri Lanka stretches a curious formation that has stirred wonder for centuries. A chain of sandbanks and limestone shoals, extending almost in a straight line across the Pork Strait. From above, it looks like a necklace of pale stones lying just beneath the water's surface. Locals have always known it, but to the outside world it became famous under two names: Rama's Bridge in Hindu tradition and Adam's Bridge in Islamic and later colonial records. Today, satellite imagery makes the formation strikingly clear, and its mystery even harder to ignore. In the epic Ramayana, this is no ordinary shoal. It is the Setu, the bridge built by Lord Rama's army of Vanaras, beings part human, part monkey, to reach the island fortress of Lanka. According to the text, Rama's beloved Sita had been abducted by the demon king Ravana, and the only way to cross the sea was to build a causeway of stones. The Vanaras, led by Hanuman, hurled boulders inscribed with Rama's name into the ocean. Miraculously, the stones floated, forming a path that stretched across the waves. Upon this bridge, Rama's army marched to war, ultimately rescuing Sita and restoring cosmic order. For Hindus, the Setu is sacred geography. Pilgrims at Rameswaram still gather at the edge of the sea, performing rituals where the bridge begins. Temples enshrine the story, and for many, the shoals visible today are not mere sandbanks but the remnants of divine intervention. To walk into the shallows, there is to feel one's feet on the very threshold between myth and history. Geologists, of course, offer another view. Studies suggest the formation is composed of sand, coral, and limestone, likely the result of longshore currents and sediment deposition. Carbon dating of some material indicates ages ranging from a few thousand to several tens of thousands of years. Some researchers argue that parts of the formation may indeed have been above sea level within human memory, possibly used as stepping stone islands by early travellers between India and Sri Lanka. Whether natural or modified, its linearity has always provoked debate. How could currents alone create such a neat, continuous path? In 2002, NASA released satellite images of the bridge that reignited global fascination. From orbit, the formation appeared so regular, so precise, that headlines around the world speculated it might indeed be man-made. NASA scientists quickly clarified that they had made no such claim, but the images captured public imagination. Was this the physical proof of the Ramayana's story? The debate between faith and geology flared anew. The British, during the colonial period, called it Adam's Bridge, linking it to an Islamic tradition that identified it as the path taken by Adam when he was expelled from Eden and descended to earth. According to that belief, Adam stood in penance for centuries on a peak in Sri Lanka, later called Adam's Peak, and the bridge was the route he crossed. Thus, the same chain of shoals carried overlapping layers of myth. For Hindus, the road of Rama; for Muslims, the steps of Adam; for science, a natural sandbar shaped by the sea. Yet what matters most is not which explanation we choose, but the persistence of memory. Across religions, cultures, and centuries, the bridge remains a liminal place, a threshold between land and sea, between the human and the divine, between what is remembered and what is erased. Such places are rarely forgotten. Archaeological surveys have raised intriguing possibilities. Some Indian researchers argue that portions of the formation could date to around 7,000 years ago, coinciding with the period of post-Ice Age sea level rise. If so, then coastal peoples may indeed have walked parts of it, leaving oral traditions of a traversable causeway. Could this memory have evolved into the epic grandeur of Rama's bridge? Myths often grow from kernels of truth, magnifying human feats into cosmic battles. A natural shoal, partially passable, could easily inspire the story of a bridge built by gods. Standing at Dhanushkodi, the ghost town at India's southern tip, the power of this place is palpable. Once a thriving port, Dhanushkodi was destroyed in a cyclone in 1964, leaving ruins half buried in sand. From here, pilgrims gaze out at the first visible shoals of the bridge, shimmering just beneath the waves. The horizon stretches flat and endless, yet the shoals form a faint line pointing towards Sri Lanka, as if inviting the imagination to walk across. Fishermen tell stories of times when the tide was lower, when parts of the formation were visible as dry land. Even today, boats navigate carefully through its shallows, aware that what appears as open sea hides a chain of obstacles beneath. The Bridge of Gods holds a lesson that resonates with Lemuria's story. Whether natural, modified, or mythical, it is a reminder that landscapes are not fixed. They change, shift, and sometimes vanish, but memory clings to them. Just as Kumari Kandam is remembered in Tamil poetry, the Setu is remembered in epics and rituals. In both cases, the ocean erases, but culture restores. Imagine for a moment walking across the bridge in some forgotten epoch. The shoals rise above water, rough but traversable, stretching like stepping stones into the horizon. Behind you, the temples of Rameswaram glow in the dusk. Ahead, the dark outline of Lanka beckons. With each step, you are crossing not only sea but myth, moving along a path where gods and men once marched together. This is the enduring power of the Bridge of Gods. It may not prove Lemuria's existence, but it embodies the same paradox. A landscape both erased and remembered, hidden and revealed. The sea may cover its stones, but the imagination still walks across them. The ocean does not keep its mysteries in one place. Across the globe, scattered ruins rise from the sea like fragments of a forgotten sentence. In Japan, off the coast of Yonaguni, divers discovered terraces, steps, and angular platforms descending into the deep. Some insist these are natural formations, carved by volcanic forces and waves. Others see the unmistakable imprint of human design. Staircases too regular, walls too sharp, surfaces etched with patterns that resemble animals and faces. Whether nature or architecture, Yonaguni forces the same question that Lemuria stirs. What if our timeline is incomplete? Thousands of kilometers away, in Indonesia, the mountain of Gunung Padang holds layers of mystery. To the casual visitor, it appears as a hillside covered with megalithic stones. But beneath the surface, geophysical surveys reveal chamber after chamber, suggesting an artificial structure buried within the mountain itself. Some researchers argue it may date back more than 20,000 years, rewriting the chronology of human civilization. Mainstream archaeology hesitates, but the evidence lingers. A mountain that may not be a mountain at all, but the shell of an ancient monument. And then there is Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, a sight so astonishing it overturned the story of civilization itself. Carved stone pillars, arranged in circles, decorated with animals, erected by hunter-gatherers over 11,000 years ago. Before agriculture, before writing, before cities, a sacred architecture already stood. It is as though memory arrived before history, as though fragments of knowledge from an earlier world slipped into the hands of people newly awakened from the Ice Age. Each of these sites, Yonaguni, Gunung Padang, Göbekli Tepe, has been dismissed at times as exaggeration or fantasy. Yet each forces us to look again at what we think we know. And when viewed together, they resemble Lemuria's story. Ruins out of time, artifacts that should not exist, alignments too precise for coincidence. They are not proof of a single lost continent, but they are whispers of a larger pattern. Civilizations rising earlier than we thought, knowledge resurfacing where it should not be. Imagine, then, that Lemuria was not alone, that it was part of a global network of forgotten worlds, each erased in its own way, by flood, by burial, by silence. A tapestry unravelling across continents, its threads scattered but still glowing faintly in the ruins that remain. To gather these fragments is to glimpse a different history, one not of linear progress, but of cycles and erasures. A history where knowledge is lost and remembered, drowned and revived, hidden and revealed again. And at the heart of it, Lemuria lingers, not as an isolated legend, but as one piece of a vast unfinished puzzle. From scattered ruins, we return to the question with which we began. Can a civilization ever truly vanish? Or does it continue to whisper, not in stone alone, but in sound, in symbols, in the very resonance of the earth? Night falls on the Indian Ocean, and the waves move with the same rhythm they carried thousands of years ago. The coasts have shifted, cities have risen and sunk, languages have changed, yet the sea continues its patient song. To speak of Lemuria is to step into that rhythm, to listen for what remains beneath the silence. For though the continent is said to be gone, its echoes persist, not in maps, not in ruins alone, but in memory. The Tamil poets remembered Kumari Kandam, a land swallowed by the sea. Temples remember skies that no longer exist, aligned to solstices that have slipped away. Languages whisper connections across oceans, syllables carrying fragments of a vanished world. Music remembers through resonance, chants vibrating in temples tuned to harmonics of the earth. And myths remember in their floods and giants, their bridges of gods, their tales of cities swallowed in a night. Each is a fragment, incomplete on its own, but together they form a chorus. Perhaps Lemuria was never a continent in the sense science once imagined. Perhaps it was not a single place, but a convergence. Of lands lost to rising seas, of cultures erased by time, of knowledge encoded in resonance rather than walls. To call it Lemuria is to name the absence. To remember it is to trace the whispers that continue. Imagine standing at the threshold of Rameswaram, where the bridge of shoals disappears into the dark. The sea glimmers with starlight, and the horizon is indistinguishable from the sky. You cannot see Lemuria, but you can feel it, in the rhythm of waves, in the spiral of memory, in the sound that lingers long after the chant has ended. What if this is what it means for a civilization to be erased? Not that it is gone, but that it survives in forms we no longer recognize. In stories told as myth, in alignments dismissed as error, in vibrations felt but not measured. A civilization not preserved in monuments, but in resonance. And so we end where we began, with a question. What if Lemuria was the lost civilization erased from history? Perhaps it was not erased at all, but transformed, from land to water, from stone to sound, from empire to echo. If you've journeyed this far with me tonight, let the whispers stay with you. Consider where you are listening from, and at what time. For even now, across oceans and centuries, the memory of Lemuria still flows. A tide beneath time, a song beneath silence,